As Gaza enters the new year, residents brace for another winter of devastation, with rising flood waters and harsh weather compounding the hardships of displaced families. Meanwhile, in Yemen, the Pentagon confirms continued airstrikes on Houthi targets, intensifying tensions in the region. The Houthis have condemned these strikes, vowing to escalate the resistance as the conflict in Yemen further destabilizes the broader Middle East. Stay with us for the latest updates on both crises. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Qnews special coverage of the latest developments in the Middle East. Floodwaters have exacerbated conditions at the Nasser Medical Complex Field Hospital in Qnews, further deepening the suffering of those affected by the ongoing conflict. Patients and medical staff are battling rising waters, hindering the delivery of vital care, while residents face the daunting task of salvaging belongings from damaged tents. The severe weather has compounded the challenges for hundreds of thousands displaced by the violence. Adding to the crisis, international aid groups report that Israeli occupation forces have obstructed the entry of humanitarian aid into the region, intensifying the already dire situation. Heavy rainfall has also flooded hundreds of tents in Gaza's displacement camps, compounding the struggles of families already living under severe hardship. Palestinian media have reported tents being swept away by strong winds that have battered the region over the past 2 days. Israeli media have reported that Hamas has offered a new detainee exchange deal, including a week-long truce to finalize a list of detainees sought by Israel. Meanwhile, former U.S. President Donald Trump called for the release of Israeli detainees in Gaza, urging Hamas to expedite their return.
And my numbers were, so they say, the 129 years, the most important election in 129 years. That's pretty good. Compliment. We won the majority by 7.
A UN official has revealed that Israeli authorities have denied over 140 UN entry requests to northern Gaza in the past 2 months. The official condemned continued Israeli airstrikes targeting Jabalia and nearby areas, including hospitals and healthcare workers, while displaced Palestinians endure dire conditions around Gaza City. The Palestinian National Campaign to Retrieve Martyrs' Bodies reported that Israel holds the remains of 198 Palestinians killed in 2024. This number accounts for 1/3 of the 641 documented martyrs in Israeli custody. The numbers, according to the campaign, exclude Gaza martyrs due to unavailable data, but 325 bodies have been returned from Gaza. The United Nations Human Rights Office has issued a report highlighting the systematic destruction of Gaza's healthcare system due to Israeli strikes. The 23-page report concluded that the conduct of Israeli hostilities in Gaza had destroyed local healthcare. The United Nations has further warned that violations targeting civilians, hospitals, and healthcare workers could amount to crimes against humanity, stemming from a blatant disregard for international humanitarian laws. Israeli occupation forces have launched raids on Nablus, north of occupied Jerusalem, and reinforced their presence with military units. Palestinian sources have confirmed incursions into several villages in Tubas, with clashes erupting during the raid on a Palestinian refugee camp south of the city. Furthermore, Israeli occupation forces have stormed Tul Karm, patrolling streets in the western and southern neighborhoods. Earlier in the day, military vehicles entered areas south of the city, stopping and interrogating Palestinian residents in field investigations. As Gazans enter the new year, hope for peace and stability hangs by a thread, while the second winter of war intensifies their suffering amidst relentless weather and ongoing destruction.
As 2025 begins, Palestinians remain trapped in a relentless cycle of violence. The war in Gaza has not only persisted but intensified, resulting in a death toll of over 45,000. A figure consisting mostly of women and children. The Palestinian Ministry of Health says that many victims remain buried under rubble, unreachable by rescue teams. UNICEF has urgently called on the international community to take collective responsibility, labeling the conflict as a war on children, who suffer most from Israel's severe violations of human rights. Despite ongoing diplomatic efforts by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States, a ceasefire agreement remains elusive. Supporters of the war, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, maintain that it will continue until specific goals are achieved. This sentiment is echoed by other Likud party members, such as National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who advocate for reoccupying Gaza and constructing settlements. Within Israel, opinion is sharply divided. Some believe the war should continue in order to dismantle Hamas, while others prioritize ending the war to secure the return of detainees. Meanwhile, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has voiced his desire for a ceasefire in Gaza before taking office, stating that he does not want wars. The current president, Joe Biden, has expressed a wish to end the conflict but has not yet succeeded. As the world watches, what will define Gaza's future in 2025?
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and moving on to Yemen. The United States Pentagon has confirmed strikes on Houthi sites in Yemen, including a coastal radar and facilities used for attacks on Red Sea vessels. The strikes targeted Houthi military positions in Sana'a and along the coast. The Pentagon announced that these strikes aim to prevent threats to maritime traffic. The Houthis condemned U.S. airstrike on Sana'a as a blatant support for Israel and vowed continued resistance. The strikes hit El Ardi and El Siana camp west of Sana'a and Yemen's Ministry of Defense, escalating tensions amid ongoing regional conflicts. Yemen's Houthi group has announced that its air defenses shot down a USMQ-9 drone in the airspace of the oil-rich Marib province. Military spokesman Yahya Saria confirmed the strike in a televised statement, noting that this is the second U.S. drone the group has downed within the past 72 hours. Several violent explosions have rocked Yemen's capital Sana'a, targeting military sites. The 1st Armored Division camp and the Ministry of Defense building were reported to be struck. Houthi-affiliated media reported that at least 4 explosions. Meanwhile, Israel's Broadcasting Authority, citing security sources, stated that the attack was not Israeli. The situation highlights escalating tensions in Sana'a, with critical military infrastructure directly impacted by the strikes. Yemen's Houthis have claimed responsibility for 2 ballistic missiles launched at Israel overnight. The announcement came after the Israeli military intercepted a missile from Yemen before it reached Israeli airspace. According to the Houthis, a hypersonic ballistic missile targeted Ben Gurion Airport, while another missile was aimed at a power station in the south. For further analysis on the impact of recent U.S. strikes and Houthi targets in Yemen, we're joined from Beirut by the strategic expert, Brigadier General Baha Halal. Mr. Baha, thank you so much for joining us on Qnews. And first off, what are the strategic objectives behind the recent attacks by the Houthis on Israeli military targets?
Good afternoon to you all. The strategic environment surrounding the Yemeni support front following the fall of Bashar al-Assad regime and its repercussions that lead some sort of imbalance in the power forces in the region. Also, we should pay attention and be aware that the issue of the support amid the absence of the Lebanese ally, which is Hezbollah, following the ceasefire with the Israeli ally, does not mean the absence of the resistance group, but the ability provided by the Yemen and its capabilities to dominate the Red Sea and what they made in the siege of the occupied Palestinian post and launching the strategic missiles that reached Tel Aviv, in which that forming a great or a big equation by targeting the Yemeni airport, and in return the Yemenis, the Houthis, has already targeted Tel Aviv and hit the generation plant of electricity that firstly is in supporting Gaza and to retaliate at the Israeli aggression to Yemen. And
yes, sir. Speaking of this point specifically, I want to assess the Houthis' actions. The Houthi strikes seem to be intensifying against Israel, with it targeting significant infrastructure like Ben Gurion Airport, like you've mentioned. How do the Houthis' actions in Yemen impact the broader regional security dynamics?
The Yemenis report and its strategic objectives of military strategies that imposed that the Yemen has a regional power that would influence its surrounding and and is capable to hold the geopolitics in its rhythm, and that is linked to the Red Sea, through which that seized Israel. So that's why they are capable to change the theory of the general that the maritime force is relying such as the anti-missiles ships, but the Houthis changed this concept by using the drones and the small rockets ballistic and hit the aircraft carriers, either American or Western. Therefore, the surrounding countries, as the Yemen and the Arab regional countries, and even Israel has its military bases, and I think this matter would affect the strategic ability of Yemen.
Speaking of the United States, the U.S. Central Command has announced the targeting of Houthi sites in the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. And from here, I would like to ask you, what are the potential consequences for U.S. policy in the Middle East, given the Pentagon's continued strikes on Houthi targets?
In fact, we always listen since the establishment of the old allies, the British American allies of the big powers in targeting Yemen. We always hear bombing and military sites, infrastructure and storage, but it became clear that Yemen, due to its big geographical sites, and chose their ability in burden and overcoming its burdens. And I think what the U.S. is doing will pay the price. From one hand, the hostility of the surrounding countries in the region, and what's happening now, even going to continue upon the elected President Trump to take his office in January. I think that will be a change in the concept of this matter. I do not say that he is not going to impose a peace, but he said that he will put an end to the chaos. We will have to wait what can happen, and we shouldn't forget that Yemen has a great experience in the war against these allies, and is capable to use its capabilities and to launch from hidden spots due to the lack of the intel of the big power such as Israel about the sites and the infrastructure.
Now, with this wave of escalation between the Houthis and Israel being quite distinctive, how has the international community, including the UN, responded to the ongoing conflict between the Houthis and Israel, particularly in terms of diplomacy and peace efforts?
I think that the military operation that has taken place, or the aggression committed by Israel throughout the region, not only against Yemen. They started by the process of the mass genocide against Gaza, then Lebanon and Syria, and today in Yemen. And I think the United Nations, that I consider it that this is the League of Nations previously wish, but they cannot do. And I think that the most easiest way is for the international community, if it is capable to impose its ability to put an end of the war in Gaza, and then will stand the support war from Yemen. But for the international community to deter the Israeli aggressions, their violations of the charters of the agreements of the United Nations related to Syria and Lebanon, and push Israel to go out from Syria, the occupied land, and do not threaten the return of the Lebanese refugees in the southern of Lebanon, and should withdraw from the southern of Lebanon also.
Now, sir, how do you assess the Houthis' military capabilities in the ongoing tensions, and how might this influence future conflict in the region?
The military capabilities of Houthis, with the lack of information about it, as the Houthis are using the hidden disclosures policy of what they have and their capabilities. But according to what we see from through their military operations, and they surprise us each time by launching supersonic missiles and diversified and more than one types of missiles, and a great arsenal that were capable to stand in front of the previous allies, or during the previous war against Saudi Arabia and the Western countries, whereas Saudi, UAE, Sudan, Britain and European countries, the Yemen has managed to struggle and wasn't only in the stance of defense, but replaced by the funds and by launching the ballistic missiles towards Saudi Arabia. Today, based on our witnesses and our knowledge of what they did before and what they did today in Tel Aviv by hitting the electrical plants and the Ben Gurion airport, I think by owning the supersonic missiles, the know-how and the capability of driving these missiles, and most importantly, the intel in hiding the systems away from the enemy, and as well as the American, and this would influence that Yemen will be a very effective regional state in the sphere of the Red Sea, controlling.
That was the Brigadier General Baha Hilal. Thank you so much for your insights and for all the information you provided us with. Thank you so much for being with us. This brings us to the end of our special coverage on the Middle East. Remember to stay updated by following Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EG for the latest developments, and thank you so much for watching.